I turned on the news accidentally and there was death, there's a war, there's interest rate rises, there's economic situations, and you get fed all this scarcity, which is ultimately fear. And when you start to fill your brain up with those thoughts, you go to some interesting places. How do we get ourselves out of that to move from scarcity into abundance, where there's enough resources, there's enough clients, there's enough money, there's enough time, there's enough love? We're going to produce very different results when we're focusing on that. Today, I want to open up a conversation around scarcity versus abundance. I think this is really important for personal brands because what we focus on ultimately influences what we feel inside, which impacts the action and the decisions that we make, which influences the results and also how other people receive us in the world. And the first thing you might be observing if you're watching the video version of this is that I look very sweaty right now. And I went for a run. It's one of the first in a spat of 30-degree plus days that we've got here. I went for a 7K run. Just had a shower thinking I would cool off, but it obviously didn't take. So I'm still sweating here, but that's okay. And the reason I wanted to go down this route right now is I turned on the news accidentally. And I don't do that very often anymore. I try to avoid the news. And there was death, there's a war, there's interest rate rises, there's economic situations, and you get fed all this scarcity, which is ultimately fear. And when you start to fill your brain up with those thoughts, you go to some interesting places. And I go through the dance myself with scarcity and abundance, being in business for 13 and a half years. I've had my original company, it's still running, and I've felt it in the economic sense when we've had lean times in the business. I still experience scarcity around time. There's not enough time, we won't get there on time, which I've shared on other episodes. People experience it in relationships with love and loss. And it's ultimately when we're looking at a scenario and we're attaching that meaning of loss or it falling apart and falling to pieces, and we tend to chunk it all the way up to this devastating outcome. The problem with that is it's not a very resourceful state, so we tend to not do our best work, attract much, or produce anything when we're in scarcity. And you've probably spent time and know people that tend to live there. When you start a conversation, it goes to the doom and gloom. It's always negative, and they keep focusing on that, and that's what they keep seeing and magnifying in their world. Then you would have also met someone that's the opposite. They're very abundant, they attract good things, they feel great, they're very positive, and it tends to lift you up as well. And how you show up in the online world is going to influence who you attract to your tribe and your following. So if we at any point in time can get triggered and pulled into scarcity, it could be an event that happens. For example, you lose a deal in your business or someone doesn't pay you, and all of a sudden you start going, this business isn't going to work, it's going to fall apart. I've had those thoughts before. Or something happens in your relationship and you go, the relationship's breaking down, I'm never going to meet anyone else, etc., etc. Or for me, there's not enough time, I'm not going to get this done, and running that loop. How do we get ourselves out of that? Because if we can have some strategies to move from scarcity into abundance, where there's enough resources, there's enough clients, there's enough money, there's enough time, there's enough love, we're going to produce very different results when we're focusing on that. And I've worked out over several years some really good action items that can pivot me out of scarcity into abundance very quickly. Now, I'll go into scarcity multiple times throughout a week, so I'm not immune, it happens. Any sort of event can trigger something like that, but it's not living there, it's staying there temporarily and pulling yourself out. And these actions that I'm going to share with you are to help you achieve that outcome as quickly as possible. One of the first things that makes a difference is movement, and that's changing your physiology. So generally, if I'm really low, I'll be in an unresourceful physical position, slouch, sitting down. And if I go for a run, it changes my physiology, the endorphins come in, I've made positive progress towards my fitness and my health, which instantly changes how I feel internally. So if you see yourself or find yourself focusing on what's going wrong, it's all going to fall apart, my first suggestion would be to move and to change your physiology, because that's a really powerful way to do that. The second thing I would recommend is to make a list of what you're working towards and what you want. So rather than focusing on what can go wrong, which is generally what's causing the scarcity, what are you creating right now? What are some of the activities that you're going to do to move towards them? Some of the goals you're setting. What does your compelling vision of the future look like? Where do you want to travel to? What are some of the things that you'd like to own? Some of the experiences that you want to have? What are some of the wins that you've already created in your life? Make a massive list of what you've already achieved, and instantly you're focusing on what you've done, showing your resourcefulness, your ability to create, and what you want to create moving forward, and then even push it out into the horizon horizon so you can expand it and make it bigger. So you instantly go from that negative focus into that positive creation mode, which is where the abundance is. The next thing I'd recommend, and I do this often, is clear out your environment. So it could be cleaning out the fridge, the garage, your wardrobe, the office, the boot of the car, and just creating space and removing all the clutter. That can create a feeling of zen, flow, and calm, and can also feel like progress because you've deleted and eliminated some things that were causing that scarcity or that attachment in your life. So decluttering is the next one. Another great tip is to focus on helping other people. So what can you do to make someone else's day better? Who can you serve? Who can you support with no agenda, not to receive, but just to give? So you could write a post that could help some people, so give away some value. It could be reaching out to a friend or family and giving to them, because again, that's moving towards the positive versus focusing on the negative. The next one, if you're running into financial scarcity, this is a really, really big one. One of the things I really believe in is the law of reciprocity. And what I'll do is, if I feel like I'm blocking myself financially, is I make sure that I've paid all my vendors and all my bills. So I'll go, is there anything that's outstanding, whether that's just a phone bill, energy bill, are there any invoices in our companies that we haven't paid? Is there anything that we could pay now or pay faster or sooner? So we're keeping the money in circulation and we're paying, because that scarcity tends to be holding on to money and that lack. Whereas if we want to receive money and yet we're holding on to our money and we're not paying our bills, it's a counter energy. And what happens if you're in a situation where you don't have the money to pay a particular bill? Another way to look at it is, if someone owed you money, what would you want them to do in that situation? You want them to communicate, to tell you what's going on, reinforce their intention to pay, and then ultimately to put some money towards that and show you their goodwill, and they're going to move forward with that. So there's a few really powerful ideas. So if you find yourself constantly going to a place of scarcity, you're probably not going to produce much in your personal brand. You're not going to show up powerfully with content. If you're doing monetization strategy, you probably won't attract great clients, and you'll feel like there's a lack of flow of finances and opportunity coming into your world. So if you utilize these strategies that I've shared with you today, very quickly you can pivot and get yourself into that abundance by decluttering, focusing on what you want, doing some good for other people, clearing any bills and paying people that you owe money to, and creating that space, moving your body and getting that physiology going again. So the invitation, there's always an action item with each podcast episode today, is to write that list of what you want to create, that compelling vision for the future. And next to that list is what you've already achieved. What have you already created in your life? Any wins that you can think of, because the next time that you start to feel scarcity, and it could be because you're watching the news, you're on social media, or you've been around some people that have put you in that unresourceful state, you can go for a walk, go for a run, and then come back and read that list on what you want to create and instantly start focusing on that, which will completely change how you feel and what you do next. And also your wins to show, hey, I've already ticked many boxes and had wins. I've got this resources list of stuff that I've already stacked in my life that I can leverage into the future. So that's your homework today. It's good fun. I recommend spending some time thinking about what it is that you're going to go out and create and what you've already created in your life. As always, if you've enjoyed the episode, make sure you're subscribed and following so you catch each new conversation as it drops. And if you can leave a 5-star review, that helps more people discover the show.